Hey there, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Stephen Keith, and I'm the Executive Director of Change Management here at Centerline. And we're super excited to be presenting this information. It's something that we're really excited about, something that we're doing a lot of work in and happy to be presenting here today. So there's so much energy and tension around customer experience today. When I say CX, I'm hoping that that translates to customer experience for everybody. So we do say CX a lot. There's so much energy and attention around it, and especially in banking and financial services, that we're feeling like it's a good time to have this conversation, and we're happy to have all you guys on the line right now. We're going to talk just for a minute or two about why we're here, who we are. We're going to move into external and internal factors that are impacting financial services. We're going to go into how world-class CX programs are developed inside banks. And then we're going to take a look at how we assess the maturity of CX programs, show you a 180-day action plan, like how do you get a world-class CX program off the ground in 180 days, which is something that we're doing a lot lately, so we're very happy to be doing that. Tiny bit about our company and why we're here. We've started calling ourselves a laboratory because we're in a constant state of invention for our clients. Why? The market environment's moving so fast that we're never really doing the same thing twice. And it makes sense that we're putting ourselves in a marketing and CX laboratory environment so that we're doing the work that you would expect to be doing in a laboratory to prove some fairly provocative hypotheses out and getting the work done to support those. Now, our team in that bottom left area, the MCM, our team's made up of consultants, business intelligence folks, innovation management people, and so on. We live within a larger marketing organization at Centerline, which is a world-class content creation and marketing strategy company. And we're all one big, happy, integrated family who's doing some really super groundbreaking work for a lot of really interesting clients. Our team specifically is the MCM group. We're the ones who focus on CX and CX inside of banks. There's three things that we really zero in on. Those are program effectiveness for CX initiatives, customer centricity, and cultures of accountability and measurement. What we do with those three things is help organizations fight those little battles around agility, adaptation, and simplification. And something that we've been doing quite a while. How we keep ourselves busy, just if you're curious, like how much experience do we have? We've been working in this sector for quite some time and having a lot of fun doing it. We're working with some big banks, a lot of work with IBM, GE, and some brokerage houses and so on. One of the first things we want to do, as if you don't already know this, sometimes we run into groups that really aren't super successful in some of the things that they're doing with CX. And one of the things that we like to do is show them what the power of CX is and how it really measures up. So we know that if you're an organization that's doing CX appropriately, you're going to probably start seeing a 9x factor outperforming others who aren't doing it in terms of loyalty. And this thing just blows my mind. A 23x outperformance in customer acquisition, which is super important. We all want to do it. Not a lot of us are aware of the modern tools used to do it, but super critical. And then a 2x outperformance in terms of profitability over those who aren't doing it. This is research from McKinsey from a couple of years ago. So I can only imagine that these numbers are actually a little understated. So we break up some of the work that we do into external and internal factors when we're trying to figure out for some of our financial services, for banking and insurance company clients, what are the external factors that are affecting them getting the right CX programs in play, and then what are some of the internal factors? We're going to go through some of the external factors first. First, start with the dark side. We know that as CX professionals inside of regulated institutions, you have a really super hard job. We hear it all the time, and we can't empathize with you enough. We know that you have risk aversion built into the DNA of your org, and there are certain things that you have to do that not a lot of other people are doing. And we know that you're the first to push all those buttons that challenge the conventions, and that's not always so fun. We are an organization that has been holding the hands of some of the larger banks who are doing CX initiatives and running into a lot of obstacles. So in some respects, we feel like we have heard this story 100 times. On the bright side, everything is a bright side, right? You're coming, things are turning around, and a lot of you are becoming known for leading new approaches and innovation, and finding new ways to collect and use information around CX that haven't been done before. So naturally, we're always chronically curious about what's keeping CX experts from doing their best work within the org, and but we're going to start with the external pressures. So there's three main external pressures that we see that most of our clients are up against. The first one is financial tech startups. There are a lot of disruptions, a lot of them happening in Western Europe. They're starting to pop up a little bit more. We have our ear to the ground on a couple fronts in terms of the startup environment, who's being funded, what FinTech startups are being funded, and what those startups are doing, and how they affect our clients. Number two is regional competition. We have competition in our backyard, something that we need to worry about. And three, we call the hyperdynamic customer expectations. So it's actually inside of your org, you have certain pressures. Outside of your org, you have certain pressures. But outside of your industry, you know, entertainment and travel and all those other things are also exerting pressure on you guys that not a lot of people are tallying. If I was sitting in front of you, I'd ask for a show of hands how many people have seen this graphic. We've seen it. We did not create this, but we've been having a lot of success putting this in front of some orgs. What this is sort of a deconstruction of the Wells Fargo, one of the larger national banks in the United States. For those of you dialing in overseas, this shows where some of these financial technology incursions are having the greatest unbundling effect. Unbundling is really it's the process of taking apart the different things, the different products and services inside of banks, and doing something that's more novel or something that provides more accessibility or convenience and so on. Most of the time we hear people talk about this unbundling effect having its greatest impact on the consumer and retail end of things, not really impacting the mid-market and the business banking side of things as much, but not to say that it's not. So one of the things that we're hearing in terms of this unbundling is, you know, the people don't really need, the operative word there is need, don't really need banks, but they sure as heck need banking. They need the type of access and convenience. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for the banks? Another thing, as we mentioned before, the FinTech, which is financial technology wave that's crossing the Atlantic, we're seeing a ton of stuff, and we're in contact with folks in Western Europe that are seeing a lot more pressure than we are right now, and it's definitely moving across. We're going to start experiencing the unbundling of this a little bit more. So if you're feeling the pressure of Venmo and Acorns and Lending Tree and stuff like that, you can expect to feel a little bit more. So how are the banks reacting to this? The largest banks are working to improve their innovation reflexes. We use that word to indicate how fast, when something hits you, how fast are you responding, and what's the quality of that response. So that's a really important thing to think about with respect to making sure that you're spending time on the right things. So with respect to the financial tech startup, that first pressure, what are some of the pro tips that we have for you guys? One, evaluate your future competitive landscape with competitive research. Two, develop or enhance your organization's innovation management program to consider the impact of these incursions. Three, develop a modern CX center of excellence to handle the org's CX reflex, speed, and quality. And four, explore integration of lightweight BI, business intelligence capabilities, to become more predictive. The second external pressure that we're talking about today is the regional competition we mentioned briefly. Regional banks are feeling the pressure from both sides. They're feeling it from the national chains and some of the smaller chains. So if you can imagine like a pressure from the left and a pressure from the right, there's also pressure from the up and down as well. What impact is this having? Most larger national banks are setting the curve, so to speak. So we have like the PNCs, the Wells Fargo's, Banks of America, and so on, with respect to banking, who are sort of setting this curve, and they're coming out with innovations that are really setting the expectation that a lot of other organizations are set to follow, or sort of expected to follow. Now, we get called on that hypothesis quite a bit with individual examples of how that's not the case, and we totally understand that. But by and large, that's some of the stuff that we're seeing. Another thing is many regional banks are constricting their competitive efforts, focusing on voice of customer surveys and applying CX in such a narrow way, and that's, to us, is a missed opportunity. So a lot of the stuff that we do is help organizations expand their CX effort as much as they possibly can. So what we see here is, it might be hard to see, but the very top blue line is actually a customer expectation line. So if you imagine that there's a static linear customer expectation, and then you take 5 segments. In this case, we took 5 banking customer segments and mapped out over the course of 5 years what that would look like. It's obvious that when you apply certain things, like in this case, we worked with the red curve, the upwardly mobile experience, for a year, and the impact was to focus on shrinking the gap. So this graph's 1-year effort targeting the upwardly mobile segment, that bottom red line, with key mobile innovations driven through a CX program is, it really is your dashboard, something that you can use on a grand scale to see how well you're doing. In terms of regional competition, the pro tips, you're gonna find some similarities. Again, we want to look at the competitive research, like how are other folks doing in that realm. CX innovation management, which develop or enhance your org's innovation management program. So one of the things that the Centerline team really focuses on is how important innovation management and CX are to one another. We don't see those necessarily as two totally separate things, which is kind of a novel concept. It's not not one that we share with very many other people in the in the industry, but something that we find a tremendous amount of success with. Now, what's different between the first external pressure and the second one is, in dealing with regional competition here, we prioritize the recommendation of a CX metrics strategy, that one on the bottom, over a lightweight BI program, really zeroing in on developing your world-class metrics strategy and driving workflows out from what you could measure, but pushing yourselves forward with a little more might, we could. The third external pressure is hyperdynamic customer expectations. Now, what this means is we're dealing with, on our customers' behalf, on our clients' behalf, expectations, convenience, access, utility, ease of use, functionality that's actually meaningful and relevant to people. So we're helping to drive CX through this innovation path to make sure that the enhancements are taking real user research and plugging it directly into a CX innovation management program. So when you think of things like Venmo or Mint or Acorns, or even Amazon or Uber, or the next planned generation of PNC's virtual wallet, you can see that the expectation that people are having is really, it just keeps increasing. So you guys want to see the top 36 mobile innovations your customers are expecting in the next year? Here are the things that we're seeing. We're building an ongoing tally of things that folks are looking for in terms of whether or not their banking partner is measuring up to their expectations. And this thing really, it doesn't surprise us anymore. The list keeps growing. Some things get knocked off as everybody's doing it, photo, bill pay, and some of those other things we're starting to see more and more. Social connections and payments, those things are really interesting. Now, with respect to that third external thing, we have the pro tips. The one that's different here is the comprehensive CX program. Comprehensive CX programming here is a comprehensive CX supply chain approach. And what that does is really, really cool. It ties CX deeper into your org by coupling CX with business intelligence and innovation management. We have so many really interesting stories to tell. We don't have the time to tell them here, but we're seeing some really cool ways which people are coupling their analytics effort, their innovation effort, and their CX programs together in new ways, and they're always coming from different areas of the bank. But with respect to the other pro tips, the innovation management program, CX Center of Excellence, and the CX metrics strategy, those things are relatively the same. Now let's move on to internal factors that are impacting the financial industry. Okay, so here is where we are doing probably some of our most meaningful and work where we really feel like we're meant to be doing this. We're focused a lot on some of the internal pressures, and we see how you're organized as being one of the pressures, or we call them inhibitors some ways. The priorities and processes you follow, and your culture. So we do these EKG or MRI readouts for our clients, and then their CX and associated innovation management programs to rapidly map the real obstacles that are preventing them from getting the most meaningful results out of their CX programs. And really cool things happen when we do this stuff. So as you can see here, it's probably a little difficult to read, and we're going to be flying through this thing relatively fast, but this is an example of one national bank that was having problems with their CX program. And what you see here is they had 5 VOC programs operating in total isolation. I know, that's absolutely remarkable. A CX program that was operating exclusively for the retail market and totally ignoring some of the other segments. And then they had a digital marketing team that was gatekeeping it all. So any enhancements that they wanted to make as a result of their CX efforts couldn't be effective. They couldn't get the digital marketing team to actually pay attention to it. So you had 5 total separate silos. You had a CX program that was focused on 1/10 of revenue generating opportunity, and then you had a digital marketing team that was basically blocking the organization from getting anything done. Where we had the greatest impact here is actually getting in and doing this MRI so that we could elevate the obstacles up a few levels. Looking at some of the other key internal inhibitors for CX success, there are several things that we find to be idiosyncratic, and we find 3 things that are extraordinarily common when we do this work. I think that they're relatively obvious. Like, people have different silos. They're never the same silos that we're working in. They have different CX methodologies, isolated analytics and BI, and so on. Different budgets, obviously. What's common, though, the things that are actually the same every time that we are doing this stuff, is the org's not really set up for success. So when you look at how things are organized, what the team structure is, it's not built to get the most out of CX for the organization. And the second thing is, there are no agile processes in place. So there are, not only are they're not rapid or quality reflexes, but they're none at all. So when the doctor taps the little hammer on the knee, nothing happens. And then, and the third thing is culture. We are in situations in every single one of our cases where there are very few people who are actually engaged in what the change is meant to do, and so on. And there's such a simple fix to this that can be followed, that is something that we really love to focus on. So when you look at the environment, when we go a little bit deeper into these 3 things, this middle, that big middle circle is your org, your institution. Then you're typically surrounded by your products, and we just took a smattering or a sample of typical products, and then we wrapped the channels around that. So we have mobile, phone-based, online, different ways that people have touch points with you, or the way where your brand interacts. And then that second outer white ring is where your CX efforts tend to focus. So, which we think is pretty cool, because it's through the products and channels that you're doing your work to meet your market. That little gray area up in the around 2 o'clock is the serviceable market. So in most cases, you have a narrow portion of a larger available market that you're actually addressing. What we're trying to do is change the environments, the organization and so on, so that you can expand your serviceable market with better CX, more innovative CX. So the 3 key organizational segments that we work on, or suggest that you work on, is the org, the process, and when you put the org and process together, that's where we do the work around priority. So that has everything to do with prioritization, schema, figuring out ways to adjust the workflow so you're getting the most meaningful work done. And then the third one's culture. So the levers that we're trying to put in front of our clients to get the greatest quality output is priority, capability, and effectiveness. And pro tips here are: 1, prototype a more effective organization. This is the one that a lot of people say, are you kidding me? You think that all we have to do is just change everything inside of our bank, and that's not at all what we mean. We deliberately say prototype, which is put examples of different ways that teams are structured and doing different processes in front of people so they can see the value of those things. Number 2, CX operations strategy. Operations strategy is the secret powerhouse of these efforts. Getting the operations strategy right is something that not a lot of organizations do, and something that we recommend highly, which is basically telling the brain the brain telling the muscles what it ought to do with respect to CX. Third is develop a canonized CX shift. This is how you get the culture to start focusing, at least accepting change, and then systematically dealing with some of the resistance that comes. And there's a lot of communications, a lot of stuff that goes into that. And then finally, develop an employee engagement program where people actually start to believe and love the type of change that you're making, because you're doing something new and refreshing and you're focusing on customers and so on. So how does world-class CX get developed? How are some of the more successful organizations doing it? Well, one of the things that they do first is they start with auditing. Like they have to figure out, just like you would if you were climbing a mountain or something for the first time, you figure out where are we? We see that organizations are always doing this first step, and they're doing it really well. And that's something that we help a lot of these organizations do, which is figure out where are we, what's the future state, how do we plan for it, how far along are we specifically, and what business case needs to be developed so that we can get this thing funded and on the books. And each of these things, we're going to show you about 5 of these. We're going to rip through them pretty quick. The stuff that you see on the right is how you diagnose for it, how you diagnose the need for it. So how do you know that the organization audit is in fact something that you can benefit from? This is going to be made available to all of you people. So needing to take notes or something isn't necessary. This is all going to be on SlideShare, I am told. So second thing is organizational prototype design. This is all about mapping out what the organization was. And this is the thing that I was talking about earlier. This is just, you see a little picture down there with the concentric circles. This is organizing the teams in ways that people can see how can we get the greatest number of advantages by clustering different people and getting them to work in more effective ways. A lot of this has to do with roles and responsibilities. I bet everybody on the phone here today has probably pretty excellent stories about how roles and responsibilities are impacting the way that they get the most effective CX work done. I'm seeing a lot of people are resonating with that last one. The next is the authority matrix. It's one thing to have the role and the responsibility, but not having the authority to make changes inside your org, especially banks and insurance companies and credit unions and so on, that's not an easy thing to do. Employee engagement programs. We go to a lot of conferences. We talk to a lot of banks. In fact, we've probably talked to 80% of the banks in the United States, and many of them from overseas, some of which are online right now. And every one of them knows that an employee engagement program can resonate, and there are simple ways to get these things off the ground. Number 3, centers of excellence. We've never seen a world-class CX program succeed, really succeed without a really solid CX center of excellence. So that's something that it's no surprise to us anymore that that's a large part of what we're doing when we are helping orgs try to get the most out of their CX efforts in banks. This is usually about helping them get the best future vision, figuring out what are specific implementation and integration plans. So there's never an instance where we don't hear someone say, okay, that's great. Everybody has a great strategy, but we want to know, with respect to our specific org, with respect to our infrastructure, how are you going to make sure that this thing will work for us? And that's really what the implementation and integration plan is. And then there's process prioritization, reengineering, and governance. 4 is voice of customer program. We know that almost everybody has a voice of customer program. It's sort of the low-hanging fruit of CX. It's a little more complicated for some than others, but nonetheless, we see it all over the place. We are, if anything, we're good at helping organizations figure out how to take the next step from CX out to the next frontier. Operations strategy, that's what we talked about before, which is really mapping the brain to the muscle. How do we assess where we are, or how do you assess where you are with your CX efforts? This is all about how do you get started with this. So all well and good, but how do we, where's the pathway through all this stuff? We've put together a really simple CX maturity model, which is essentially a three-step model, which is based around establishing the foundation, getting started, and building momentum. And level 1 is all about setting the foundation, getting the goals for setting the foundation are figuring out how do we define what the CX initiative needs to do within the org and so on. And then with respect to what your organization needs to do, we've sort of broken this down into two things where, there are certain things where we historically have really helped organizations get use the maturity model to make the best determination. Stuff in the middle column is stuff that our client organizations do. The stuff on the right column is stuff that we do to help. This is never the same twice. There's always a different approach to that. Level 2 is getting started. So once we work through the foundational setting aspects, we figure out what specifically we can do to ensure that it's doing what it needs to do. I'm trying to scoot through this so that we have time on the next section, that is. But the third thing is build momentum. So once we have the foundation set and we've gotten started, what we typically experience is how do we grow this thing? So we have 1 or 2 people involved in the CX Center of Excellence. How do you scale this thing so it's actually doing the stuff that it needs? This is all about momentum building. A lot of this has to do, believe it or not, with metrics, using metrics to move yourself forward, and communications planning, figuring out all the different channels which you can communicate the successes that you're having inside the org and moving forward. Sorry I skated through that so fast, but I want to make sure that we cover all this. Once you know where you are, that means that we can start the journey. So our question is, how do you get to CXpert in 180 days? So the challenge that we gave ourselves with respect to one of our clients was, is it possible to really thoroughly and authentically eat our own dog food? We preach agility, we preach reflexes. Can we actually do this in 180 days? So let's look at a plan where this has actually worked. And again, we have this line here, yes, and the top blue dots across that vertical axis are things that our clients are typically doing. Stuff in the bottom is stuff that we're helping them get done. But this is all about building that CX coalition and getting the team, the foundation set, and so on. Setting up the communications channels. It's really like setting up the base camp for this thing and ensuring that we have all the things that we need to get started. We then move into ensuring that we have all of the foundational elements, that we're actually ensuring that we're getting all of the, this is assuming we have executive buy-in. This is moving down toward the center, making sure you have senior level buy-in. You're starting to kick off more of the CX communications and doing more of that meaningful work. We're looking at the competitive landscape and so on. In this third group, this is where we're actually plugged in. We're collaborating on prototypes. We're doing stuff relatively fast. We're effectively and fluidly using metrics data. We're using a lot of stuff, trying to move things from broke fix to predict and prevent and be a little more opportunistic with our BI data, and plugging the CX program into the innovation management program, and making more intelligent decisions based on data, just really critical. And then that fourth thing, we're getting pretty close to the final part of the 180-day program. We're really focused on calibrating what the executives are seeing, making sure that people at the higher end of the organization can start using your data, your CX data, to ensure that they're moving all the right success, the quick wins, and so on out to the organization. We're collaborating on the integration of CX, innovation management, and business intelligence sprints, making sure that collaboration, that we're getting the right output from that. And this last part is really a whole lot about refinement and making sure that we have all the things that we need to move forward. This last slide here is really just about, this gives you a little context for what some of the things that we're doing, aside from from some of the CX stuff. And on the left, you'll see the marketing change management stuff, and that's just the code word for our team inside of this big creative company that we were working in, and marketing strategy, and then creative content and experiences as well over to the right. So it's a lot of stuff. We're super excited to be having the opportunity to do the work that we do. Now we want to open it up to questions. We have about 15, 20 minutes. We see a lot of questions coming through. So I'm going to give everybody a couple, I don't know, maybe a minute or so to throw your questions forward. All right, we have a question here. The question is, with respect to external pressures, can you tell us a little bit more about the financial tech startups and how you're really seeing these things affect banks and not hypothetically? So, interesting question. So what we're doing is we're plugged into a lot of different organizations across mostly the United States and Europe, who are working with larger financial organizations to understand what they're doing with respect to startups. And a lot of this comes through competitive research. So we see that a Lloyd's in the UK is responding to certain incursions in one way. We see in the United States a lot of organizations being affected, or they're very interested, we'll say that, in some of the work that PNC Bank is doing with their virtual wallet effort. What we do with that is just put it under a microscope and try to analyze how that specifically affects some of our banks, not just today, but how it'll affect them moving forward. Let's see here, the next question. What you guys are talking about innovation management as it relates to CX, can you elaborate? So when we don't typically unpack CX and innovation management, they're always together, and that's something that's difficult for some of the financial services companies we work with to hear initially, but once we get working with them, it starts to make more sense. We have a hypothesis that with respect to financial services companies, you can't do innovation management and customer experience separately. If you're focused on customer experience for a conventional set of banking products, you are focused on work that mattered a couple of years ago. what we think is that you need to start looking beyond existing products and services and incorporating elements of innovation management into your CX efforts so that you're balancing the equation that's going to matter tomorrow as well as the one that matters today. What is a center of excellence? A center of excellence is both a discipline and a thing. It's different for every organization. We're doing a couple of them right now. One of them is a staffed office inside of an organization where they collect knowledge and experience and institutional memory and a lot of different stuff. And then they're figuring out how do we do a full-scale access shift for all of our employees so that the organization stops thinking exclusively about banking products and starts thinking about banking customers. And not just customers today in a conventional sense, but customers tomorrow whose relationship with their money is beginning to evolve. Center of Excellence is something that allows the organization to centralize all of their concerns around CX. They're especially powerful in some of the larger, older, more established banks who have more conventional approaches, because CX is typically broken up into several different silos. And the Customer Experience Center of Excellence allows them to really put one thing in place that can have a positive impact across all different silos. What if we only have a CX program in one division? How would you suggest we expand? So this is an incredibly common thing that's happening. We're in fact in conversations with folks right now that have this exact same problem. What if we have a CX program in one division? How would you suggest we expand? The Center of Excellence that we were just talking about is one way where you can start to gather the successes that you're having in one division and showing the impact that it has, and inviting the other divisions to send delegates from their specific division into the Center of Excellence so that you begin to share the right, start sharing common pieces of information and so on. And then you start approaching communications in a collective or more unified way so that more people want to be a part of the Center of Excellence, and you're not really forcing other folks to do that. Hope that answered that. Next one, we may be ahead of some folks here. We have a strong CX program and value it from the top down, but we're growing fast. So what is the best way to capture what we're doing now and ensure that it continues? So what I'm hearing is you have a strong CX program, you value it, it's valued from the top down, but you're growing fast. Excuse me. Our concern is that, or the concern that I think that we're seeing in your question is your growth is something that you're concerned about. So scaling the success of your CX program out as you grow is something that you want to make sure happens. The answer to a scalar issue oftentimes is governance. So putting governance together helps organizations figure out what are the standards for CX data collection, what are the standards for how you're making that data useful with respect to design enhancements, how your VOC approach, all of that. How do you scale that out so that more people are using that more effectively across a growing band of contributors? Every single time we're building governance that helps organizations figure this out, as well as just a growth strategy. I think one of the things that we mentioned before was the operations strategy. Operations helps you deal with that scalar growth concern, so that your corporate strategy aligned down into your specific operations strategy is doing the right things with CX that you need it to do. Next question. Best way to get executive buy-in to start a 180-day program. Wow, that's a good question. It's never the same thing twice, because getting executive buy-in has a whole lot to do with the type of organization you are and the type of executives that you have. So our success in building business cases for our clients really comes from tapping into our business intelligence team and proving this stuff out with math. So when we say that you can get with a robust CX program in 180 days, we will have a foundation to double the profit from the channel. We'll be 23 times more powerful with respect to how we acquire new customers, and we'll be 9x more effective at building loyalty. That's really, excuse me, that's the best conversation to start with someone to start to get that buy-in. That's a great question. Are you finding that the RGov evaluations imposed on banks makes CX more challenging? Are you finding that the government regulations imposed on banks make CX more challenging? Absolutely. So one of the first things I remember saying is that you guys are in an unenviable position because you have government regulations that constrict your ability to move. That means building CX programs inside of organizations like yours, it is absolutely challenging. And one of the reasons why the birth of this webinar really came from how is CX different in banking and financial services with respect to government regulations. That's something that we know a lot about, and something that we've been maneuvering around those types of things with some of the North America's largest banks for quite some time. And we're familiar with what it means to build a robust CX program in light of those regulations. So the answer is yes, it is definitely more challenging. The bright side is that there is a way to build around those regulations. Next question, our CX team lives within the larger marketing team. How do we grow our influence with traditionally smaller marketing budgets? What are the quick wins? It's an awesome question. Our CX team lives within the larger marketing team. How do we grow our influence with traditionally smaller marketing budgets? So in the maturity model that we were going through, I'm trying to get back there right now. So this should answer your question a little bit. So when you have to work within a larger marketing team, you need to define what CX is with respect to the marketing team. You need to actually figure out what it is that CX can do to support marketing. Another thing is, if you're having problems with that, do you remember the EKG that we showed you? This is something where one of the things that we would do would be to actually draw out, basically put the sensors on and start measuring where the friction lies between your CX program and your larger marketing program, and start mapping friction. I want to remind everybody that there's a handout attached to this. It's entitled CX Webinar, Rising Importance of CX in FS, version 3. That is an Adobe Acrobat. That's a PDF. I'm sorry, I'm reading and talking at the same time. That is that's there for you guys. We encourage you to take a look at it. We have really enjoyed talking to you today, and love to have a conversation with you. If there are certain things that you think you either want to have a discussion about, or want to get a little more information about, or you just want to share some war stories, something that we're interested in doing. So another thing in closing, we want to say this is the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be doing specifically focusing on CX inside of financial institutions, and we will encourage you to keep your inbox open, and we will try to hit you up with more information about that as it comes available. So again, thank you so much. Glad we could finish. Give you 5 more minutes to grab a cup of afternoon tea before you go to your next meeting. It's been great, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.